Semester 1, Paper 2, Introduction to Logic. In this session, we are going to study about logic. Let's think, what is logic? The word logic is derived from the Greek word logos, means reason or the principle of right reasoning. It is an art that enables us to proceed with order, ease and correctness in the act of reason. It is also defined as the science of thinking. Thinking is the act of the intellect by which knowledge is attained. Aristotle named logic as analytic because it analyzes or resolves logical structures. Logic ascertains certain rules that must be obeyed to think correctly and truly. Thus, it becomes an art or a capacity or habit of using certain rules in the pursuit of truth by reason. As an instrument of reason, logic proceeds with the correctness for the attainment of truth. To reach this goal, two things are required. The first one is the form into which complex operations of thought must be valid. The second is the content of thinking must be true. These twofold requirements leads to a fundamental division of logic. The former is called the formal logic or the minor logic, and the latter material or major logic. Logicians have different views about logic. They define logic according to their own reasoning. Now, let us refer the definitions of logic given by different logicians. According to Henry Aldrich, logic is the art of reasoning. According to Richard Whately, logic is the art and science of reasoning. According to Crichton, these definitions are incomplete. Therefore, he tried to bring a new perspective on logic. He defines logic as the science that deals with the operations of the mind in its search for truth. There are two divisions on logic. They are formal logic and material logic. At first, let us study about formal logic. Formal logic. Formal logic is a part of logic which examines the forms of thought with a view to ensure the correctness of our reasoning activities. Form means any repeated pattern. For example, we can see that certain patterns repeat themselves in our thinking apart from their content. The example, every vertebrate is an animal, but every horse is a vertebrate, therefore every horse is an animal. Here, the content is different, but the form or pattern is the same. When substituting symbols, it becomes every A is B, but every C is A, therefore every C is B. The concern of formal logic is to find out the principles or laws according to which the similar elements must be combined in order to ensure validly constructed arguments. Secondly, material logic. Material logic is that part of logic which investigates the content of thought with a view to determine the truth of reasoning. It deals with the subject matter or content of our thinking. It is also called major logic because both the extent and the difficulties of its problems are greater than formal logic. The truth of reasoning takes into account both the content as well as the form. Aims of logic. Logic is oriented towards the knowledge of truth. Logic helps in the self-examination for more complex operation of thinking. In remote stretches of reasoning, the principles of logic serve as both guide and an instrument of analysis. Logic helps to study the causes of error and also helps to detect and avoid it. It is the search for truth. Now, let us see how logic is different from psychology and ethics. Logic and psychology. Both logic and psychology are mental sciences in the sense that they deals with what goes on in the mind. Both deals with the thinking process of human mind as their common material for study. There are few differences between logic and psychology. One, they differ in their scope. Logic deals with the thinking of knowing process of human mind, whereas psychology deals with all the three operations of human mind, namely knowing, feeling and willing. Secondly, logic studies the thoughts of normal adult mind only. Psychology inquires into all activities of mind. The third difference is in their method of approach. Logic is a normative science, while psychology is a positive science. Psychologists are interested in thought just as it is. But in logic, we are not interested in what thoughts are, but rather in what knowledge they actually give us and whether this knowledge is really true or false. Fourth, logic inquires how our thoughts give us knowledge. Psychology, on the other hand, investigates into the form and structure of thought. Logic and ethics. Ethics underlies certain values that serve as the standards of human behavior. Truth, beauty and goodness are the norms of thinking, feeling and willing. Logic is the science of correct thinking with truth as its goal. Ethics judges the value of human actions with reference to the ideal of goodness. Beauty is the central concern of aesthetics. Both logic and ethics have an end or an ideal, and therefore they are normative science in kind. They agree in their method but differ in their scope. The main concern of logic is to discover the general conditions on which the truth and validity of our thinking depends. In ethics, our attempt is to establish a norm or ideal that might be realized in our actions. The subject matter of logic is thinking and the subject matter of ethics is human conduct. The goal of logic is truth, whereas the goal of ethics is goodness. Logic as a normative science. Logic is the science of correct thinking. Science is a systematic and organized study, but logic is the science of valid thinking. Thinking is the instrument of knowledge. Sciences in general can be divided into two. First is the positive science, which deals with things as they appear in nature. It is also known as natural science or descriptive science. Second is the normative science, which deals with things as they should be. It sets up certain norms or standards or ideals to which the facts under consideration must conform. Ethics in this sense is a normative science because it teaches us how our conduct ought to be in order to reach the ideal of goodness, rightness, wrongness, etc. Normative science is also known as regulative or evaluative science because it regulates its materials towards a standard and estimates the value with reference to that standard. Logic sets up truth as its ideal and teaches us how our thoughts ought to be in order to reach the goal of truth. Thus, logic is a normative science of thought. Logic as a formal science. All objects we observe in nature have certain form or shape and are made up of certain matter. For example, the table we use can be round or square and is made up of wood or steel. Now, the table can change its matter keeping the form and vice versa. Just as we recognize a distinction between form and matter in the table, we can also make a distinction between form and matter in thought. By the form of thinking, we understand the way in which our mind thinks about something. On the other hand, by matter, we mean the things about which our mind thinks. The matter of thought may vary from science to science, but the ways of thinking with the help of which knowledge is obtained remains the same. Logic is mainly concerned with these way of thinking or forms of thought. Hence, logic is called formal science. Form and thought are like the two sides of the same coin. Let's check the utilities of logic. They are: logic furnishes us with the scientific principles of correct thinking with reference to which truth can be obtained and errors can be eliminated. The study of logic helps one to find out the cause of one's invalid or incorrect reasoning and to set it right. Logic provides us with a balanced mind. Since logic is the science of the operations of the mind, it gives us practical rules to train our minds. Logic helps us to satisfy our thirst for knowledge by using scientific method or scientific knowledge. In order to study logic, one should first of all try to distinguish between prepositions and sentence. Prepositions and sentence. Prepositions are always identified from a series of grammatical sentences. A sentence is an array of words that conform to grammatical rules and conventions. But a preposition is a sentence that conveys a unit of thought. Therefore, every preposition is a sentence, but every sentence need not be a preposition. This unit intends to give the skill of analysis of prepositions that can help us to identify a preposition from a heap of sentences. A sentence may express a preposition, but it is distinct from a preposition. It is customary to distinguish between sentences and the preposition they may be used to assert. Two sentences which are clearly two because they consist of different words differently arranged may in the same context have the same meaning and may be used to assert the same preposition. A preposition is the expression of a judgment. It is a description or an assertion of some fact which is either true or false. It is also a logical unit. A preposition may be true or false, which is determined by the facts. Sentence. A logical preposition is different from a grammatical sentence. Sentences express thoughts, wishes, feelings, commands, questions, etc. A sentence is an expression in natural language and often defined to indicate a grammatical unit consisting of one or more words that generally bear minimal syntactic relation to the words that precede or follow it. A sentence can include words grouped meaningfully to express a statement, question, exclamation, request, command or suggestion. For example, come here, may God bless you, I wish you win a lucky draw, etc. These sentences are not prepositions because they are not in the logical form and they do not affirm or negate anything. All grammatical sentences are not prepositions, though it is true that all logical prepositions are grammatical sentences. A logical preposition is differentiated from a grammatical sentence on the basis of its logical or prepositional form SEP. Prepositions and statements are not exactly synonymous, but some logicians use them in the same sense. It is generally held that there is no harm in using them interchangeably. Prepositions. A preposition is the statement of a certain relation between two terms. It thus consists of three parts, two terms and the sign of relation between them. Of the two terms, one is called the subject, the other is called the predicate, and the sign of relation is known as the copula. The subject of a preposition is the term about which something is stated, that is, which may be affirmed or denied. The predicate is the term which is stated, that is, which may be affirmed or denied about the subject. Copula is the sign of affirmation or denial. The enunciative and judicative prepositions. The prepositions can be considered from two points of view or from two movements of thought. Firstly, as an assembling of the elements into the structure which the act of judging presupposes. This is the initial joining together of concepts by a copula which furnishes the raw material of the judgment as true or false. Such a construction is called the enunciative preposition. Secondly, as an expression of the actual judgment itself, the structure which stands for a definite declaration that this is the way things are. The prepositions as the expression of this vital activity of the intellect, judging, is called judicative preposition. Kinds of prepositions. According to modern classification, prepositions are classified into simple and compound. A simple preposition contains no other preposition as its component. For example, Rama is a man. A compound preposition contains other preposition as its components. Example, Raju is clever and also beautiful. Simple prepositions. Simple prepositions are those prepositions which do not have other preposition as their constants. This is of four types. Number 1, subject predicate prepositions. Number 2, class membership prepositions. Number 3, relational prepositions. Number 4, general prepositions. Compound prepositions. Compound prepositions have other prepositions as their component. They are classified into number 1, hypothetical prepositions, second, alternative preposition, third, conjunctive preposition, fourth, disjunctive preposition. Let us summarize what we have discussed so far. In this module, the most fundamental concepts of logic is introduced. The importance of knowledge is explained along with the kinds of knowledge and the method of reasoning. In this sense, logic becomes the science of correct thinking. Moreover, many definitions by different logicians is also presented here. This section also presents logic as a formal science and normative science with an emphasis placed on the relation between form and matter. The aim of logic and its relation with psychology and ethics is also presented. Finally, an examination of the utility of logic is also made. The next module presents the difference between the mode of sentences and prepositions used in logic and the main classification of different types of prepositions is also mentioned. Now, I am going to give few questions to answer. Number 1, discuss the nature of logic and explain the utility of logic. Number 2, explain the nature of logic with the help of a definition. Number 3, logic is a formal science. Explain. Number 4, explain a compound preposition. Number 5, what is the difference between preposition and sentence? You can refer following books for more information. Number 1, Copy M. Irwin, Introduction to Logic, Macmillan Publications, New York, 1982. Number 2, Sullivan J. Daniel, Fundamentals of Logic, McGraw-Hill Book Company Publications, London, 1963. Number 3, A Textbook of Logic, SCRT, Thiruvananthapuram, 2003. I hope that you have enjoyed this session and we can meet later with another topic. Till then, bye. Thank you.